This is ODAT Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
This episode is brought to you by Audible.com. In preparation for this interview, I downloaded the audiobook My Fair Junkie, a memoir of getting dirty and staying clean by Amy Dresner. So for about a week, I listened to Amy tell her story as I drove to work, as I ran errands, and even as I went on hikes. By the time I sat down for the interview, I felt as though we had already been hanging out and we were already BFFs. So is that creepy as it sounds? It didn't sound creepy when I sat down to write this, but well, let's just say I am now an Amy fan. She's got a wicked sense of humor and she is a truth teller, and I absolutely adore her for that. Anyway, let me circle back to Audible.com and say that if you don't already have it, you should totally get it. To make it even easier for you to jump in, listeners of ODAT Chat podcast get their first book free. Just visit odatchat.com, that's ODAAT chat.com, and look for the audible.com banner on the right. And if you're anything like me, you'll be obsessed. So you're welcome. Hi friend, welcome to ODAT Chat. My name is Arlena and I'll be your host. The primary purpose of the podcast is to carry the message of hope to those who are still suffering from alcoholism and addiction. My guests and I talk about their addiction stories, what happened, what it was like, and what life of sobriety looks like now. Through these conversations, I'm looking to uncover the new ideas, changes in perspective, and the daily habits or routines that lead to healing and long-term recovery. But before I jump into the podcast today, so instead of a quote, I'll share a little prayer. It's called the Set Aside Prayer. It goes like this. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, my disease, and especially you, so that I may have an open mind and a new experience of all these things. Please let me see the truth. So I absolutely love this prayer. The Big Book talks about the freedom from the bondage of self, and this is really how it happens. It cracks the facade of like self-sufficiency and self-righteousness and allows the possibility for something new to come in. So from a place of humility, we can remain teachable enough to allow ourselves to be healed. So there you have it. And today's conversation is with the author, comedian, and super fabulous speaker, Amy Dresner. We talk about her journey from the perch of Beverly Hills to her drinking and drugging that landed her into not only the depths of despair, but facing a felony for attempted murder, I think it was. Not fun. But, and as a heads up, let me just tell you, we talk about her book and we do cover some areas that can be considered a spoiler. So consider this your spoiler alert, but it's so awesome and totally worth it. I don't even care. I had to just keep going. So, and just so you know, Amy is one of the speakers at the She Recovers event in LA this September. I believe it starts the 14th through the 16th. I'm giddy with excitement to see her there, and I hope you go too. It's going to be awesome. There'll be like 600 women in recovery there. So with that, please enjoy this episode with the super beautiful and wickedly talented Amy Dresner. Well, Amy, welcome to the ODAT Chat podcast.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here.
I am so excited to have you on here.
Aww.
I listened to your audiobook, My Fair Junkie, and I felt like we were hanging out for like a week.
I love that.
It was
it's so
awesome. Fun. It was so fun. And I got so caught up in it. And then so I'll put a link in the show notes to your book and stuff. I highly recommend it. It was so good. And we were talking before about some of the words that people use to describe your book and your story, and raw seems to be raw and honest, authentic. These are all words that keep coming up over and over again. I saw that you were on the doctor show. You know, they were talking about that too. It was, okay, and side note, that dude, what's his name? The cute guy? The doctor?
Trevor, whatever. I don't know.
Oh my God. I
I don't know. He's too like straight looking for me. I don't know.
well,
Not for me.
yeah, I thought he just looked like he was a little scared.
Scared of me? Yeah, right?
I was like,
I think they all were, except for the older guy on the end. The other doctor thought I was hilarious.
He was chill.
Like, he was chill. I know. They were all sort of terrified of me.
Well, and it's so funny because I don't know if it's because they're just so straight. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they just were like, oh, wow. They were like so deer in the headlights. Like, they hardly knew what to do.
Also, I mean, they didn't, that was like, I don't know, the backstory that they showed was just only part of the story, and it was very salacious and shocking and meant to sort of get viewers.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the whole story of like that then I was on the chain gang and I lost everything and I had this, this epiphany. So it was sort of just like, hey, she's a nymphomaniacal Beverly Hills drug addict who tried to stab someone. You know what I mean? It was like, well, wait a second, tell the whole story,
Girl, but wait, there's more.
And it was like, yeah, it was shot live, and it was all like white-haired grannies in the audience, and you should have seen their faces when they showed that backstory. I was mortified. I was like,
know.
oh my God, I want to die right now. So I just tried to save myself in the interview as much as possible,
Listen, I could tell that, it's different when you're like at a meeting and you're in a room full of your own people, right? Like the energy is different. Like you can see it in their eyes that they get you're kind of crazy. But these people don't have the frame of reference. Like, it's like, oh yeah, you can be crazy and then you can get help and then you can get better. And then it's actually a good thing because now you can relate to other people and help people. Like we're uniquely qualified to help other people. Listen, Granny doesn't understand that. They're just like, I cannot believe.
Awful.
Yeah.
It was so awful. It was like, it was mortifying. I was just like,
my heart went out to you. I was like, wow, that looks like the most uncomfortable.
It was so uncomfortable. I was just like, oh my God. And they'd had like Nikki Sixx on the week before, but it's like, it's okay when you're like a famous rock star for whatever reason. Do you know what I mean? Dudes are expected to be like that. When you're a woman, intravenous drug addict, sex addict, and perpetrator of domestic violence, it's like a whole different ball game.
Shame.
Yeah. And also coming from a privileged family.
Right.
That it was just like, oh.
It was all bad.
It was brutal.
I felt for you. I was like, that is, I don't know.
I know they try. I felt like I was in court the way they dressed me up. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you had a very conservative gray turtleneck.
That was my turtleneck. I know, but it was because they gave you really strict guidelines about what to wear, and then they put your hair up, and it was like, oh yeah, they wouldn't let you be. I would have worn like a rock and roll, like ripped up T-shirt if I could have been myself. Oh yeah, they were like, wear a dress. I was like, oh, hell no. That was very specific about what they wanted you to wear.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, we'll have to talk about the whole rundown.
God forbid you should look like yourself,
Right. Right.
But I'm very lucky to have had that exposure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really.
So
a lot of people bought the book. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So, well, maybe we should back up a little bit. So usually the way I start out the podcast is sort of asking about your backstory. Like, I feel like we were just discussing earlier, Gabor Mate is a doctor who specializes in addiction, and his whole thing is like this all stems out of childhood, addiction stems out of childhood issues, and that it's not the only way, but I'm always fascinated by family dynamics because I heard early in recovery that we recreate our family of origin in our adult life, and the purpose of that. Right? Yeah, and the purpose of that is that as our adult self, we're able to solve problems for like our inner child that we couldn't solve when we were powerless little kids. So,
or we just reenact that same thing over and over again, which seems to be what I've been doing for a while now. It's like, oh, are you emotionally unavailable and a workaholic? Okay. I'm like magnetized to you. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, but there is that idea that a lesson is, there are no mistakes, only lessons, and a lesson is repeated until it's learned.
Of course.
I like that idea because it just seems more forgiving. You know what I mean? It just seems like, oh, okay, it's not a mistake. There's just more to learn. And then as I am able to incorporate new ideas, then my behavior changes and I don't have to keep doing that.
Yep.
So, but anyway, I feel like I know your whole story, but let's just, because I listened to the audiobook, but let's talk about your story a little bit. So where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Laurel Canyon area. My parents split when I was 2. My father was a screenwriter and my mother was a fashion designer. I'm an only child, and they had a very contentious relationship while they were married and while I was growing up. And I was sort of shuffled around between them.
Yeah, that had to be really hard. So your dad is a professional It sounds like he was a very successful screenwriter.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
He did TV and movies, and he was sort of my main parent. My mother was, trying to scrape together a living as a fashion designer, and she was starting to, hit her 40s. It's a very ageist profession, as are a lot of professions. And my mother's family, her mother and her brother were both schizophrenic, and
really?
she was really abused. Yeah, she was really abused and beaten as a child and neglected. And so, I mean, compared to her upbringing, she did amazing, but I always felt like I couldn't get enough. Like I couldn't get enough of her attention or love, or I felt, very needy. And, there's that saying, we're only as needy as our unmet needs. And wherein my father was, he has also he had a difficult upbringing. His father was a hotel manager, and his mother died in childbirth, giving birth to his sister.
Oh, really?
Who has cerebral palsy. And so my father's mother died when he was 9.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So my father's sort of model to parent was how they parented his sister, who was disabled. So my father sort of overly did everything for me, as well as the fact that I was like the first woman he ever really loved. Like I opened his heart and I was his child. And, I'm very much like my dad. Like I'm really verbal and then my mother moved to Mexico when I was 13. And so I didn't really have a female role model when I hit puberty. So that's the joke. Everyone's like, God, you're so masculine. It's like, well, I was raised by my dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Primarily. I mean, so it's like, yeah, I can play basketball and I can play poker and I can, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but I don't really know how to, cook or any of that, This reminds me of when I recorded the book.
Oh.
You're like in a glass box. When you're like in a glass box for like 5 days at a time, and it's freezing, and you can't wear anything where it scrapes on anything. So you can't wear a jacket. And you're sitting there like shivering in this chair. And if you screw up at all, you've got to like go back a couple words. And it's basically like being in sort of like a, like a death chamber where, where it's like
a gas chamber,
a glass box, and everyone's just sort of looking at you,
Oh my God, crazy. Okay, but you were telling me about your mom. So what made your mom move to Mexico of all places?
She'd always felt really, she'd actually lived there when I was young, when I was like 2. She lived in Guadalajara, Puerto Vallarta. Her grandmother only spoke Spanish, so we're part Spanish, so she'd always felt very connected to that whole culture.
Your mom's half Mexican?
Yeah.
So am I. That's so funny.
Oh, Peña. Yeah. Her whole family's Peña.
Oh, very cool. Okay. Yeah. All right. No wonder. Okay. All right. Yeah. So she always felt drawn to there. So she went back there. Who did she live with?
She just went there knowing no one. And she started a company where interior textile design. And she had the Zapotec Indians weave her rugs and stuff like that.
Wow, that's intense.
My mom's pretty hardcore, yeah. She's like,
your family is very like entrepreneurial and achievement oriented, right? Like your dad is very successful, and
they were like, "Why is your achievement, doing as many drugs as possible and going as many rehabs as possible?" They're like, "Let's change the goal here."
Yeah, right. Okay, so you were with your dad most of the time, and did he get remarried while?
Oh yeah.
Well, you guys.
Times.
Okay, a couple times. So you had to deal with the whole stepmom. Did you have step siblings along the way?
But none that I lived with.
Oh, okay.
They were mostly grown, and then when he got married 4th time, she was young and I was already grown up. So Yeah.
Okay, so do you feel like maybe some of your addiction came from like your mom's side? Because your dad wasn't a drinker, was
Yeah,
he?
he is a heavy drinker.
Okay,
He's
dad's
not
a
an
heavy
alcoholic,
drinker.
but he's a heavy drinker. There's a lot of mental illness on both sides of my family. A lot of depression, a lot of people in psych wards, a lot of people who've killed themselves,
Oh, wow.
institutionalized, that kind of stuff. And, you know, even my grandfather had like electroconvulsive therapy and was on like the first antidepressant in the 50s and then was put back on antidepressants in his 90s. And my father just sort of made it like part of his personality. Like, I'm the depressive drinker, writer, you know what I mean? Like that was his
Right.
whole facade. There's a lot of, yeah. So, and on my mom's side, again, there's all that schizophrenia and also depression and addiction. My mom was addicted to amphetamines and booze, and my uncle was a speed freak his whole life.
Wow.
So I think it was a combo of genetics and also I just always felt lost. I never felt like I knew how to navigate in the world. I felt insecure. I felt different. I felt I wasn't well equipped despite how educated I was. My parents sort of hovered over me and were very overprotective. And I think also, and I've talked about this before, when you grow up privileged, you're given everything. So you never have to do anything for yourself. And eventually you don't think you can. You become sort of crippled.
What is that? Learned dependent?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, because you're always given money, you don't ever, you know,
You
really
don't have
have
to struggle.
no. And so you basically become entitled, but then you're also very fear-based that you can't do anything for yourself because you've never had to.
Learned
And the
helplessness,
longer
I think
that
they
goes
call
on,
it.
exactly. So
Learned
that's what
helplessness.
happened. And that's really a
Oh,
big,
okay.
big part of where that shift happened in my 40s when I was left penniless in a psych ward and then went, you know, on Medi-Cal disability and was facing that court and the divorce and had to make a living for the first time in my life. My parents were both out of money and it was like, boom, I was out, my trust fund was dead. And it was like, and
Oh
it was
my God.
really starting from scratch at my fort. And it was so difficult, but it was so necessary.
Yeah, so yeah, we kind of jumped to the end, but when you were like, when did you actually, how old were you when you first had your first drink? Was it the alcohol like your first,
I was 19.
you were 19 when you had your first drink or like
Yeah.
your first drunk?
Yeah.
That's kind of late. Like in
It's,
high school, you didn't,
I
like
was
the kids were,
no, I was very obsessed with purity. You know, I was
you
like,
were?
yeah, I didn't kiss anyone until I was 18. I didn't lose my virginity until I was 19. I didn't smoke cigarettes. I didn't drink. And my father sort of made a bet with me. He was like, I bet you'll smoke or drink or do drugs before you're 18. And I said, I bet I won't. And he said, I'll bet you $1,000. And I was like, and that I make this joke, like that's how Jews raise each other. We just bribe each other. But I was actually afraid of drugs and
Jeez.
alcohol. I was really afraid. And
Okay.
I think that
Why were you afraid?
I I don't know. I mean, I think deep down I knew I was going to have a problem, but my cover was that it was a cop out and I was obsessed with purity. And I think that's very typical for sort of alcoholics and addicts. We're very extremist. You know what I
Okay,
mean?
yeah.
Like, right? Like, you know, people get sober and it was like, oh, I used to shoot, you know, meth and now I'm vegan. It's like, you know, that's very
Super
normal
extreme.
for, yeah.
Haven't you found in your experience that it seems like people with addictive behaviors have like this big energy, and it just feels like if we don't find a way to focus or channel that energy in some way, we just spin out of
Oh my
control?
God. I've said that exact same thing so many times in shares and in podcasts where I'm like, it's like you have
Yeah.
the fastest horse in the race. And if you can keep that, you know, our intensity and our compulsivity and all of that, our sensitivity, all of that stuff. It's like if you can keep that horse reined, you can accomplish amazing things and win the race.
Yes.
But if you let loose those reins, you're so fucked. And then
Yeah.
you get kicked off the horse and whatever. So yeah, so it was like
Serious
absolutely, I
consequences.
totally agree with you exactly.
I mean, because a lot of the people that are in my circle, they're really smart, but it's there is an element of intense energy that needs to be
Absolutely.
focused on something
Absolutely.
productive.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like we need those healthy boundaries. And then once we're set, then, things are good. But
Yes.
yeah, but I was just never like you, probably just not given any kind of coping skills to deal with these big feelings in a healthy way. Do you feel like that was your experience?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had an eating disorder, from 19 to 24. Or 25. Yeah. I was anorexic and bulimic. That was my first thing. And then I found drugs.
Oh, that was your first?
Yeah. And I think they're all sort of the same thing. I mean, I make this, and then I found drugs and I was like, oh, well, this works better, and I'd been on psych meds this whole time. And then later, as you see, once I get sober for the whatever time, going through all that stuff, I develop a sex addiction and I make this, joke. It's like, it's all the same thing. I'm going to put something in my body. I'm going to change my feelings. It doesn't matter if it's a donut or a Xanax or a dick. You know what I mean? It's like, how do I, and I got into cutting too. So it was all about how I wanted to control and change my feelings.
So I read in an article recently, you phrased something very similar to the way I encapsulate my entire experience as if it was in a bottle, a bag, or blue jeans, I was doing it. Right? And I saw in the article that you say something kind of similar.
I don't remember. I think someone wrote that about me. Did I say that? I don't know.
You wrote something similar, and I was like, oh my God, I think I met my soul twin.
Hi.
There you are. Yeah, that was, put anything in my body, anything, doesn't matter what shape it is.
Totally.
It's a God-shaped hole, not a dick's-shaped hole.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's why it was like, I feel it's all connected. I mean, when people get sober, they go, a lot of times move towards food or sex or gambling. It's like, what's the next way to escape? What's the next way to get dopamine? What's the next way to, and so I went through a lot of those different things and, checked out different programs and that kind of stuff. And now my big tool is napping. That's my big thing. So
napping.
I'm serious.
It's amazing how much a nap cures.
Right.
But let's talk a little bit about, so, in your book, you talk about, you start out the book with talking about, it sounds like I don't know if that was your bottom. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but you had an incident with your now ex-husband and it kind of sent you, kicked off this chain of events that led you to dark places and, eventually using heroin. It was heroin, right?
No.
Speed, or you were using intravenous drugs?
That was a flashback. I was I'd been sober when I pulled the knife on my now ex-husband.
You were sober then?
Well, I was actually on Oxy. I'm sorry. I was on Oxy for a shoulder injury. I had been sober for a couple of years and I'd relapsed on Oxy for shoulder injury and then started to abuse it. So I was on Oxy and sort of drinking when that happened.
Oh, okay.
But, my intravenous Coke days had been prior to that.
Oh, I see.
And my meth days had been prior to that. I've been sober and relapsed and sober and relapsed for like 20 years. And big chunks of sobriety.
How old were you the first time you went to a rehab?
25.
And what event sort of precipitated that rehab?
I was a crystal meth addict and was staying up for days at a time and, then sleeping for days. And I thought I had bugs in my skin and, all that kind of stuff that we do. And I walked into a market and I woke up in an ambulance and I'd had a seizure.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So seizures are part of your,
well, yeah, now I have now I have epilepsy from the crystal meth use. It's been
caused it?
It's been 15 years. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. I have hyperactive lesions on my frontal lobe but that didn't stop me from shooting cocaine later on. So
it's amazing how that happens.
I was like, well, I don't want to touch meth again, but shooting cocaine, this is a whole other world.
That's totally different.
Yeah, I would shoot cocaine and I'd have a seizure. And so instead of going, hey, I should stop shooting cocaine, I just shot coke in a bike helmet.
In a what?
Bike helmet.
What does that mean?
In a bike helmet.
Oh, like you were wearing? Oh.
Bike.
You would put it on and then so that if you had
my head open. Uh-huh.
Oh my God. Wow. I was like, oh, what? I'm not getting what's happening here. Wow, that's intense.
Coke is a high impact sport. Like, let's wear protective gear. Like, I get it.
Wearing protective gear. Holy shit. I don't mean to laugh at that. You know, if you're in the recovery
No, it's
community,
hilarious.
we laugh at the
Oh
craziest
yeah, we
things,
laugh at
right?
stuff. Normies don't laugh. They're like really horrified. But yeah,
They're
I
horrified, yeah.
I thought it was brilliant at the time. I was like, this is super smart.
I'm a genius. Oh my goodness. Okay, and so when you went to your first rehab, do they go through the whole like 12-step process, or what is your
So
first
when
rehab
I
like?
was 25 and I went to my first rehab as a dual diagnosis rehab, and it doesn't exist anymore, and they introduced us to AA. But back then, this is, 3 years ago, you couldn't identify as a drug addict in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings.
Oh,
They would
yeah.
totally flip out. And so I remember going, oh, I'm Amy and I'm a crystal meth addict. And they were like, are you an alcoholic or not? Like people from the meeting, like screaming at me. And I started bawling. And I was like, I just really was put off by the program at that point, because at that point I didn't really know I was an alcoholic. That came later
Fucking
when,
assholes.
but now, now everyone is, yeah, everyone's co-addicted to everything, and you can talk about drugs, and at least in LA.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny because 12-step meetings are different from meeting to meeting.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, and it breaks my heart sometimes because I hear that when I hear that someone has a bad experience with a group or a meeting, that they generalize it and they think that that's how it is at all the meetings.
Of course.
And it makes me so sad.
Yeah.
So I want to tell people, it's it's
their
very
meetings are very different from
from meeting to meeting. Yeah,
absolutely.
for sure.
Mm-hmm. You got to find your group.
You have to find your people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever go to women's meetings?
How did you know I don't? I don't love women's meetings. I got to tell you, I don't love them. I don't.
Yeah.
I feel weirdly manly. I don't love them. When I had a lesbian sponsor and I was basically fucking my way through the program, she made me only go to women's meetings and gay meetings. And
I remember that part.
And I was like, well, how am I going to get laid doing that? She's like, you not, baby. You're going to concentrate on recovery. And I'm like, well, that sounds boring. So I went to women's meetings and gay meetings, and I got a crush on a girl for the first time in my life who looked like a guy. Because we got to get out of ourselves.
So love addiction and sex addiction was a big part of the book.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. And so do you feel like, you go to the gay meetings and then that's just who was there? You just fell in love with this person?
I don't know. She walked in and, they were like, she looked exactly like a man. Exactly. They were like, this is a women's meeting. She's like, I am a woman. I was like, hello, and I was like, I was like, wait a second, this might be the best of both worlds, Like I haven't been having that much luck with men. Like she can fix cars and she eats ice cream and likes Tori Amos songs and talks about feelings, but she looks like a dude. Like, wait a second. So I started watching The L Word. I was like, and of course she was just like, no. She's like, you're a newcomer and you're crazy and you're straight.
And you're not a lesbian.
Yeah, she was like, I'm like, so you're saying I have a chance here, right?
Yeah, you've been a good salesperson.
No,
Very persistent.
She had amazing boundaries. She was just like, no fucking way. She's like, you're a newcomer. I'm not going to violate that. I'm like, just you saying violate. Oh, it makes me so hot. She was oh my God, you're so out of your mind. So nothing happened. And I'm very straight.
So you're like, oh, so she's emotionally unavailable.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You're like, yes.
Yeah.
This must be love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got really, really obsessed with her, and it got really,
Yeah. So in the book you talk about you had to go to different meetings.
Yeah.
You could no longer go to meetings.
Yeah, I couldn't see her. I was like, ugh. Yeah, if you ever date me or marry me, you're basically blocked, and I'll never see you again. That's the way I deal with stuff. I just burn the bridge.
It's the guillotine. Yeah, I'm
just bam, yep, no going back. It's like
you're done.
Yeah.
Well, you know what they say, crazy in the head, good in bed.
Yeah, I still struggle a lot with that stuff. Now I've taken, like I've told you, I've taken a year to really just focus on me. And I've been really busy with the book and
doing all the press.
oh God. Ugh,
So
yeah.
let's back up a minute. So at the end of the book, so catch me up. So at the end of the book, you
Are we
are
going
in
to
a
ruin it for
relationship.
everyone? Are we going to ruin it for everyone who hasn't read
Yes,
it?
because fuck them. This is my time. This is for me. I'm a
Right.
selfish alcoholic,
Okay.
whatever.
All right. Hit it.
This
Hit
is
it.
this is our girl time. So yeah, so the book is amazing. You go through. Oh, and by the way, the creepy guy who was having you do things.
Oh yeah.
Wow, that was intense. I was so
Yeah. And he was
brave.
programmed 7 years, 7 years clean,
So
sober.
here's the thing.
It's like
This has
so
been
many
like,
sick motherfuckers in that. Yeah. And it was like,
yeah,
but the fact that I was going around, going, like, I guess
I
that's
did
some
not know
people's
he was
kink.
programmed.
I
I
guess
did not
that's some
know.
people's kink, but like,
Yeah.
I just was so, I had the worst self esteem and the worst boundaries. And I was like, so not into it. And I just did everything he said until I finally just like, was like, what
Snapped
the
out of
fuck am
it,
I
huh?
doing? Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't
That was
realize that
super weird.
you had already been sober and he was programmed.
Hmm.
Twisted motherfuckers. Yeah, so yeah, 12-step programs are not the hotbed of mental health.
True.
And so that's why I was asking about women's meetings, because I remember when I first got sober, I was this tiny little, I was blonde back then and severely underweight. I was just depressed. Everyone thought I was doing speed or whatever. But the women would pull me aside and be like, there are wolves in sheep's
Of
clothing
course.
at these meetings, and so you need to be very careful.
No one did that to me. No one, when I came in, no women told me. And it's usually the same dudes that do that. You know what I mean? It's at least at
Yeah,
the meetings here. It's the same guys that sort of 13 step all the newcomers. No women
yeah.
pulled me aside and went, it's
Nobody said
these
that to you,
guys.
huh?
And so
Yes.
I got 13 stepped a lot,
Yeah,
you
so I
know?
think that's if I was going to provide a cautionary tale, your example, your story is a perfect example of that. That's why I was asking about women's meetings, because when you go to women's meetings, it's really all about the solution, and when you take that element of the sex and love out of the equation, then you can really focus on recovering what's really going on. But that was very frightening to me, and you and I have something similar. Like, I didn't have a great relationship with my mom when I was growing up, so I didn't learn how to be a friend. I didn't know how
Oh
to.
yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know how to relate to other
I didn't like
women.
women. I didn't like women and I didn't know how to bond with them till I moved into that women's sober living where I lived for 2.5 years, where I'd always had, some close female friends, but in general, I didn't like groups of women. And, I go to mixed meetings, but I go to mixed meetings where we all know each other. It's really safe and
Safe
it's very
ones.
program based. It's very solution based and it's not a meat market at all,
I'm
but
sure there's
women's,
plenty of those out there in
yeah.
LA.
Oh God, yeah. And it's like, I mean, I don't know. Then after having dated a normie, I'm like, well, they're just as crazy as people in the program. Like, well, am I going to marry my Colonel Puff Puff? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't
Well, I
know.
mean, you can still have mental illness without the element of addiction.
Of course, and everyone's got issues. And it's like,
Everyone,
again,
yeah.
it's like, who am I attracted to? And.
Yeah, and we were talking before about how we attract at the level of our
Yeah,
self-esteem, right?
yeah.
So, and it sounds like you've done just a ton of work though. So you've gone through multiple rehabs and you've had extended periods of time, and you've done a combination of therapy and 12 steps.
Oh God, I've been in therapy since I was like 13. Yeah. I
So
don't,
do you feel like
and I was in I was diagnosed as borderline, so I was in electrical behavioral therapy, and I've been in, psychoanalysis, and I've been in, every type of therapy. I've had body work, I've had Rolfing, I've had, biofeedback, I've had exorcisms, I've had shamans, I've had, you know what I mean? I've done everything. I've done everything. I did everything because I didn't want to work the steps, and I was creeped out by AA.
yeah, but what do you feel has been the most helpful? Like, has it been helpful to really dig into the 12 steps with a
Yes,
sponsor
I
and
think the
do that
fourth step
self-exam?
was life changing for me, at least this time around, really, because I was really ready to look at it, and I was like, oh, I'm not who I think I am. Holy shit, and
Oh,
I saw myself the way that other people saw me, and also I felt, empowered because I was like, first I felt ashamed, and then I was like, wait a second. if I change, maybe everything will change. And that's exactly what happens. You change and your whole life changes. But, so it's like, for sure, the 12 steps, I needed a manual on how to interact in the world.
Right.
And I needed someone to go to with my terrible ideas and say, hey, because I can be very impulsive and very reactive and stuff like that. And I will tell you, honestly, sweeping the streets, for having been convicted, I was charged with a felony, and then it got dropped down to a misdemeanor, and I had 240 hours of community labor, and I was sweeping the streets. It was me
of LA.
Of Hollywood, yeah.
Wow.
Like syringes and human feces and whippets and diapers and cigarette butts, and that was fucking life-changing.
240 hours.
Hours.
Did it have to be, was it just weekends or it was every day?
No, it could be, you got to decide, but you had to have it done by you were given a
window,
like a date when you had to have it finished by. So you could figure out when you wanted to do it. But that, I think, really shifted me in a way that nothing else had shifted me.
Why?
It was, first of all, it was so humbling.
It was humbling. Okay.
I mean, I'm a Jap from Beverly Hills grew up with maids.
You did? Did you go to what high school? Did you go to
Westlake?
Westlake?
Yeah, an all-girls private uniform school in Bel Air with like
all girls
celebrity kids. Yes. So here I am, and I walk up there, and I'm just like very entitled. And I'd had a trust fund, and then I married this rich guy, and then all of a sudden I'm like dropped on my ass. And, in Medi-Cal disability, in a shared room for 2.5 years in a sober living. And I'm sweeping the streets. I walk up and I'm thinking like, oh my God, like I don't belong here. And I had more time than anyone else. And I was one of the very few people there for assault. So it was like me and like 40 Mexican guys there for DUIs. And there I am for assault. And I had more time than anyone else. They're like, would you rob a fucking
crazy.
bank? Like, Jesus Christ. And yeah. It was just, no one talked to us. People were like, you're criminals. We wore a uniform, and no people talked to us except for like drunk homeless people and a few like.
So was it during the day with like people
we had to be there
walking
at 7
around?
in the morning,
like...
and we were released at 3:30 in the sun,
like
nonstop, sweeping. It was Then princess bullshit got knocked out of me pretty quickly. And it was really, really, really humbling.
Oh, okay.
And I got a work ethic, and I took responsibility for my actions, and it made me realize, like, I'm not special, and anything, you think you're so different, like, that could never happen to me. I could never be arrested, or I could never, do that, or I could never be in the psych ward. And, like, everything that I thought could never happen to me happened to me. And I think that that's one of the reasons I wrote the book was, like, here I am coming from this privileged background, and like all the gnarly shit that I had judged happened to me, where I'd been like, oh my God, like, banana. Like my bail was $50,000.
Wow. What's normal bail?
I've never been arrested before.
That's a lot of fucking money.
Yeah, so
$50,000?
10% of that, and you have to show up in court. And it was just, the whole thing was just really
super humbling.
Really, really humbling. And I had no money, and I had to really, learn to support myself. And it was just like my whole life was flipped upside down. It was a fish out of water for sure.
I was wondering about that, about the whole money thing, right? Because I was very, as a listener, I was listening to this, like I was stressed out for you. I was like, oh my God, how is she paying her bills now? Because you talked a little bit about school, but I didn't hear anything about, you didn't have like a lot of career stuff going on.
Drug addict. Like, I graduated magna cum laude from college. And then I went to Santa Cruz for my first year, and then I transferred and went to Emerson.
Okay, so you graduate, you're obviously really smart.
And then I just kind of, I sort of just was like, I moved back to LA, and I was like, I'll be an actress like every other Hollywood kid. And then I realized very quickly I could not be anyone but myself.
Oh.
I was like, oh, and then so I just for the next, basically 15, almost 20 years, I was just, going in and out of rehabs, and I was very struggling with a lot of depression and a lot of drug use. And I was sober for 7 years, or dry for 7 years without the program. And I lived in Paris and London, and I had a fashion line, blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
But, that was like a whole other thing. But my life was really small and I didn't really change. And then I did not know how to live a life.
Yeah. When did you start supporting yourself? Did you start supporting yourself with your writing? Because you're a really good writer. Did you start writing for the Fix then? Or when did you start?
Let's see. Yeah. I mean, I started writing for the Fix in 2012. So I got married in 2008. And I guess, yeah, I pulled a knife on him in 2011. So I really started writing for the Fix in 2012.
Really?
And prior to that, I was a comic. I was a comic for like 5 years.
Oh, wow. That must have been,
So
how did you get to be a comic? Like, what possessed you? You're just I was
so cuckoo, and I'd be in meetings and I was just telling my story and sharing, and people were falling over laughing. And a couple professional comics came up to me and they were like, you should really think about being a stand-up. They're like, you're hilarious. And so I took a class and I started doing stand-up, and I ended up on a sober tour all over, and I was like performing all over.
Wow.
And I did that for 5 years. And then when I got arrested, and then when I got arrested and sort of like really relapsed pretty hard, sort of everything came crashing down. And I was like, I need to focus on putting my life together and not telling dick jokes on stage.
On stage. I'm sure you do plenty of that at meetings, though.
So that was that. But I just, I've been chronicling sort of my depression and my drug use this whole time.
Oh, okay. And
on my computer.
Oh, okay.
So when it came time to write the book, I didn't have to recreate all the dialogue. I had been basically chronicling it. I knew I wanted to write a book. I had 3, half-finished books on my computer.
Oh, wow. So you've been writing the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah, I was writing when I was on crystal. I was writing when I was on coke. I was writing when I was in England, when I tried to kill myself. So I had all these details of exactly what was going on at the time. Plus I was writing a lot during the Fix, which was sort of,
up and down,
chronicling, oh, look, I just, slit my wrist and now I'm in the psych ward and that's what this is like and blah, blah, blah. So.
Yeah, that's intense. No, it's amazing how therapeutic writing can be. And I think if you have this ability to write and journal and things like that, it can be really helpful as you're applying that to the 12 steps, because the 12 steps are really like largely a writing process.
I mean, I didn't really to me, it was always separate. You know what I mean? I mean, my writing for my step work is very different from my writing for magazines or for the book. I mean, the book was extremely painful to write. It was really, really, really hard to go back into that place of active addiction. Mm-hmm. And also, I didn't recognize the person I was writing about a lot.
Oh, wow.
I was like, why? Don't do that. Why are you doing that? Stop. Like, oh my God. Yeah. Like, who is she? Why is she doing that?
What were the things that you did that were making you say things like that to yourself? Like when you were doing drugs or acting out?
Yeah. The sex addiction stuff was really, really hard to write. That was, to me, I mean, there's still a certain rock and roll cool about being a drug addict, but there's nothing cool about being a sex addict, especially a female. And there was stuff where I was like, I don't want to put this on the page. Mm-hmm. This is mortifying.
Yeah.
I was really like, and I know as a writer, that that's the stuff you have to put. Exactly the stuff that you don't want to write. Exactly. Yeah, because that's the stuff that someone's going to go, oh my God, I identify. Thank you. Like, if you're trying to look good in an addiction memoir, like, you're not being honest enough. Like, let's be
real.
And I mean, Jerry Stahl, who blurred my book, who's a friend of mine and sort of my icon, who wrote Permanent Midnight, his quote was like, if you had the nerve to live what you lived, you should have the nerve to write it. Mm. And I was like, all right.
I
Here we
love
go.
that. I love that. Yeah, and that was the thing. Maybe we can talk a little bit about anonymity too, because doing the podcast, I was struggling with whether I should do this or not, or talk about my 12-step experience. But the truth of the matter is like when I was I wasn't anonymous about my drinking. So why should I be anonymous about my recovery? You know what I mean?
It's interesting too, because you have a lot of time, and it's people usually with a lot of time that are very, very sort of adamant about 11th tradition.
Yeah, I just don't agree. I just don't agree because here the thing is I don't like the whole stigma about being in recovery. Like
I agree with you.
There's a stigma about addiction, but there's also a stigma about recovery. And I think my platform is about education, right? It's about education to the masses, but also there's many forms of recovery. And at the end of the day, Amy, it doesn't matter what the problem is. The solution is the same. Everyone's so hung up on, was it a sex addiction, gambling? It doesn't, none of that matters.
I agree with you. Well, I say that in the book. I mean, I went to SLAW and I went to SAA and I went to other programs, and it's the same steps.
For people who don't know.
SLAW is Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and SAA is Sex Addicts Anonymous. And it's the same, basically the kind of the same steps. And my sponsor was just like, hey, if you do the steps, all that other shit will fall away. That's all part of your alcoholism, Amy. It's not separate. It's just an arm of it. You know what I mean? And I recently put down nicotine too. And I didn't go to Nicotine Anonymous. I just cold turkeyed. And I mean, I knew I was using it to numb myself. And I quit vaping. I started smoking and vaping when I went through that breakup last year.
Do we want to talk a little tiny bit about it? Well,
yeah, so fine. I mean, the book the happy ending
you're in a relationship.
Was me the sunset with Bradley, and in April of last year he dumped me and moved out.
Yeah, I think he did you a favor, to be honest.
And I, kind of fell apart.
So let's talk about that, because a lot of this is what I wanted to ask you about, is specifically because breakups are so painful in recovery that it's important for people to, since you've been through it, it's like, how did you survive it and what did you learn from it?
I wrote a piece called My First Sober Heartbreak for the Fix, and people should look it up. It's really
I'll put a link to it in the show notes. What was it called again?
I think it's called My First Sober Heartbreak.
Okay.
Something like that. I'll send it to you. And it's so, I mean, people just, my agent was like, God, it's so beautifully written, but it's really sad. And it captures exactly like the heartbreak feeling.
Yeah. The loneliness and despair that people go
and the abandonment and the self-esteem and the grief, and especially when someone's living with you and you come home, and there's an empty closet, and it's like you're
the empty closet,
and you're sleeping like on your half of the bed for the next year, and just it's brutal. So of course most of my breakups made me either try and kill myself or I relapsed.
Right.
And
neither of those things happened this time.
No. I mean, they were my first thought. Mm-hmm. Of course.
But that's the thing the thought comes, and then what did you do? How did you handle it?
So I felt my feelings, which is what we hate doing. I was like, plenty of people get their heart broken, Amy, and not everyone slits their wrists or puts a needle in their arm. So let's grow the fuck up. And, and I felt my feelings. I lost 15 pounds, and I mean, I looked so ill, and I'm still trying to put that weight back on. And I started smoking cigarettes again, and then I switched to vaping, and I cried and cried and cried and cried and cried. And I just kept going to meetings and stayed close with my friends and just believed that I would get through it. And it was the most painful thing I've ever been through, worse than my divorce. So painful, because I was so in love with him. And it wasn't my choice, and it seemed sort of out of nowhere. The other thing too was it was like 6 months prior to my book being released. So I didn't feel like I could write an addiction memoir.
Oh, before the release.
And then relapse before it came out. Can you
That is
imagine? You know what I mean? Like they'd
amazing.
be like,
So
well,
do you feel, that's one of those
yeah,
things that you can't plan for, and it's like a coincidence God thing. Is it odd or is it God? Is it?
yeah. I mean, there I had a certain amount of accountability I felt to the readers and to my publisher and to my agent. And I just thought, God, how embarrassing. Like, they'd be like, well, Amy can't be here, but she can Skype, but she's Skyping in from her 8th rehab. Hi, Amy, tell us about your, and I just thought, this is a book about hope and recovery. And I just thought, you can't let people fucking down, Amy.
Interesting. Okay. So,
But I mean, I did take him out of the acknowledgments and the bio and all
yeah,
that
of
kind of
course.
stuff. And I don't think the happy ending is him. I think the happy ending is that I was sober, and I think the even happier ending is that I've stayed sober. I have
Yeah,
5.5 years
and
now.
I think
And
the
life happens,
yeah.
breakups happen. It's like that's part of life.
Yes, but it's how you responded to it that I think is really interesting, right? Because it brings up a lot of stuff for you to look at. It made you go back to, as you were saying earlier, kind of it went back to your childhood, like abandonment that you experienced from your mom or from your dad, people that are like emotionally unavailable for whatever reason, even if it's justified. There's that saying that your parents did the best they could. I heard this one guy say, yes, and it wasn't good enough, right?
Ooh, ooh.
It wasn't good enough because it left me feeling like I had needs that went unmet. And then I totally identified with that because I was, very similar to you in the sense that I was attracted to people who were emotionally unavailable.
Yeah.
And in recovery, I learned it was because I couldn't face somebody who was willing to see me for who I was because I couldn't accept who I was. But over time, as my self-esteem has improved and I've allowed myself to receive better things, my relationships improved too. And it was...
Yeah, I mean, I think what it taught me was, I mean, that was the best relationship I've had to date. It was certainly one of the sweeter. I mean, that relationship continued on past the end of the book, and we lived together and all that kind of stuff. But there were certainly signs very early on that he had issues and was frightened of commitment. And I think as a lot of women, I had that Svengali thing, like, I'm going to change him. Like, I'm special. Like, you haven't met anyone as special and witty, and I have a magical pussy, and I'm going to change your mind, And it's like,
right.
so, I mean, I will never do that again. I mean,
Right.
if someone says, it's that Maya Angelou quote, when someone shows you who they are, fucking believe them the first time.
Yeah, believe
And he
them.
told me, he was like, hey, I'm terrified of relationships and marriage. And I should have been like, see ya, not,
But
I'm
don't you
going to
feel like you
change.
learned something from it? Even though it was super painful, it's like you wouldn't be who you are now had you not
I
gone
was a
through
great
that.
partner. I was an amazing fucking partner.
Yeah.
And even he would say that. We don't speak. And he even said, you're the best girlfriend I've ever had. That was a living amends to my ex-husband. I was a terrific partner. I was, loving and nurturing and maternal. And I really, really opened myself up.
And
And
so now
let that
you have
person.
that capacity to
Yeah, and
be,
that's cool. And now I
yeah,
know I can be a great partner. I didn't know that before.
yeah,
Now I'm like, I am, it's like I need someone who can bring it to the table because I can be an awesome partner and
yeah,
I won't accept anything less. And so it's like, so this year has been about healing and,
healing.
there's been people that I've been interested in, but, as soon as I see a red flag, I'm like out of here.
Yeah.
And also it's been a lot of promotion in the book, and I've gotten a lot of love from people who've read the book, and the messages they send me are so just great. I mean, they're just like, you gave me the willingness to save my own life, or you made me feel less broken and less alone, and I can't thank you enough. I mean, I'm sorry to cry. Just
Oh no.
those messages move me so much, and that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book that honestly to help other people. And even people who aren't addicts say, God, I understand it now. I understand my
Yeah.
brother's addiction
Yeah.
better, or my mom's, and you let me have a conversation I could never have. And, even I told you, I got a message this morning from a parole officer, and he was just like, holy shit, like, I've been a parole officer for, 2 decades, and your book is so fucking starkly accurate and on point and incredible about addiction. I'm just like, wow. And that's why, like, fuck looking good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get it.
It's like, the sex addiction stuff was super, super mortifying, but I know that everyone's had that experience where they've done something they didn't want to do because they felt
Absolutely.
pressured or felt the person was going to be angry or didn't have the self-esteem to say no or were lonely or
Yeah.
whatever, whether they took it to the extreme that I did or not. To me, my book is really about feelings. It's about
Yeah.
self-hatred and loneliness and self-destruction and wanting to bond and, all of those kind of things. And it's like, so I didn't want it to be a book just for addicts,
Right.
Well,
and you just said it, right? It's this, everybody has like this intense need to bond, right? And to get connected at the heart. And I think you have a wonderful capacity to be honest and share from your heart. And there's just something about that energy that makes me feel like, you know what? Me too. I totally get it. It's like in the rooms of recovery, we find a new normal. Like your normal, my normal is different than people who have never experienced anything like this. And we need to know that we're not alone and that we're connected but also that there's hope for us, hope for like a better future, or even just the next best thing. I feel like every relationship picks up where the last one left off. And, as painful as this is, sometimes I like to think of it as growing pains. Right? And that, you did this growth and then you don't have to do this again, right?
Yeah.
Like the next time when you're ready, like you said you've been out of relationships for a year, which is huge. It's such a huge gift for you to give yourself, because you will be a totally different person than you were a year ago or in that last relationship. So when the next person that comes in, you're like totally different.
Well, I'm not needy now. I mean, this is the first time I haven't jumped from one thing to another. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Where I
it's
just
totally
sat with
different.
myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I really just sat with myself. And, I'm a little worried about the celibacy maybe being sort of the sexual anorexia component of the sex addiction. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've been on
less
blocks.
destructive of the two.
Yeah, but it's also like I've been on blocks now for a year, and it's like it's like
Been on blocks?
I've been on blocks.
What's block?
Up on blocks. Someone said that to me. They're like, "You've been up on blocks for a year, like you haven't been."
Oh, like you put a car, like out of commission.
Like, yeah, like a car. Yeah.
You've been out of commission for a year.
No, I mean, at this point now, I'm a little bit frightened. I'm a little gun shy. I got hurt so badly in this past relationship.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit frightened.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well,
so,
listen,
but
when
I
in
also
doubt,
been
don't,
focusing
right?
on my career. It's been a lot of book promotion. Like I told you, we're negotiating a series deal. I focused a lot on my program. I've been focusing on getting my body back. I really, really kind of got to a terrifyingly low weight.
So you're nourishing your body.
So
your
I started working out. I stopped vaping. I've got a trainer. I'm eating. I'm like, all that kind of stuff. And
that's really good self-care.
I know, but it's like, and I'm okay with it. And I'm watching. It's like we were talking about before. My mom's fallen ill. We were talking about that before.
Let's talk about your mom a little bit. How old is your mom now?
80.
She's 80, and tell me what's going on with her health.
She'd broken a hip a couple, 10 years ago, and then she broke her other hip recently. And when you break a big bone, I don't know if you know that, there's I mean, I'm not a doctor, but there's some fatty stuff inside the bone so she had like a mild heart attack and a pulmonary embolism as well.
Whoa.
And so, yeah. So I went to Santa Fe, and now she's, after a bunch of months, she's wheelchair bound and she's starting to lose her memory. So I've become power of attorney, and I'm in charge of all of her finances, and I can't even do my own finances. So this has been like big girl panties fucking like instantly. I'm an only child, and it's like, holy shit, And so it's been very stressful.
Yeah.
And as I told you, when it first happened, and, she was like, well, and I had to handle everything and find her a place and deal with the bills and, become power of attorney and sign on to her bank and sign under this and sign. my first thought again, which is old thinking, is like, if I put a needle in my neck, I'm not responsible and I'll be the broken one.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
you know, and I just thought, those days are over, bitch. Like, get it? No. You know what I mean? Like, no, 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 no. Like, this is your chance to give back and be there for her for all those times that she was there for you. And it's like, she needs you now. But it's been very, very, very stressful. And then my father recently said to me, he's 81, I guess, but he's in great health. And he said, you know, I'm just paring down and, you know, getting ready. And I just said, are you sick? And he said,
Paring down
no.
And getting ready? What does that mean?
Yeah, just like, he's like selling stuff.
Downsizing.
Yeah. And I was like, are you
Preparing
sick?
for something?
Yeah. And he was like, no, I'm just being responsible so you don't have to deal with what you dealt with your mom. Because I had to go to Santa Fe and put all her shit in storage and you know, put all that stuff. But that instantly triggered my fear of abandonment, my fear of financial security. And I was like, I got to have a mate. Like, I got to be married. I got to have a boyfriend. I got to have a mate. Like, I got to, you know, I felt terrified.
Right. Yeah.
Of being like alone and poor for the rest of my life. It just triggered all of that.
Right.
You know, and there's my best friends are a lesbian couple that live upstairs, and they're like, you're part of our family. It's
sweet. It sounds like you've surrounded yourself with some really great people.
Yeah, I have amazing people in my life.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you're getting a lot of help, but how are you dealing with the stress? I know when I have an aging older father too, and it does help to talk about it. Do you have people to talk about this stuff with? Like,
yeah, I do, because, you know, unfortunately, dementia and Alzheimer's and all that stuff, although she's, you know, not even, you know, it's just the beginning of, it's just like some forgetfulness, is very common. It's terrifyingly common.
Right,
and so
yeah.
A lot of my friends, that either their grandmother went through it or their parent went through it. And so I have people to talk to about it, but I feel a little bit like I've lost a parent and gained a child.
Yeah. And you don't have any children?
No.
Yeah, so
I think the universe was like, we're going to make you barren because we're not going to pass on all these crazy genes. Thank you very much. You can live through your book.
Was that a conscious choice, like that you didn't have kids, or it's just the way life?
I got pregnant in my 40s and I miscarried right away.
In your 40s?
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've never really been it wasn't a conscious choice. It wasn't an unconscious. It just never happened.
It wasn't something that you really went after.
No.
Yeah.
And I didn't really feel that maternal vibe until I took care of that child.
I know, in the book. So, yeah, tell that story a little bit, because I thought that was such a sweet story.
Okay, so basically I'm like this, you know, violent drug addict in this sober living with all of these moms, and the house manager had a baby. It was her house too. It was a very small sober living. It was a very close-knit group of us. And it was her first baby, and it was like probably 2 a.m, and she was just like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. Like, this baby will not stop crying. And she went to all the moms. There was a couple of moms that lived there. One had 3 kids, one had 1 kid, you know what I mean? And she went to all of them and said, please help. And they all did their sort of tricks of the trade,
their
right?
Mom tricks.
The baby would not stop crying. And then she comes into my room and she goes, you're up. And I was like, are you out of your mind? Like, I've never had a child. Like, you're crazy. Like, and she goes, please, everyone's tried everything and nothing's working. Just try something. I don't know what to do. And I was just like, I grabbed this like little baby with the little, you know, windmilling feet. And I was like, and I was like, I don't know.
Little sack of potatoes.
Yeah. And I just threw her over my shoulder, and I remembered my mom did something called a ruru. You probably know what that is, right?
Yeah.
So when I was a baby, and so I just started walking around the house, and I was like, and the kid passed out in
amazing,
like in a minute, and everyone was like, what the fuck?
So mad at you.
Yeah, they were like, you're the fucking baby whisperer, like you know. And I ended up being that kid's nanny for the next year. That kid was strapped to me like a bomb. I had that fucking baby Bjorn, like that backpack, and I had her wore her on me, and like
You wore that shit like a badge of honor.
Yeah. Yeah, and I, pushed her around in a carriage, and it was like I was basically doing that, writing for the Fix and sweeping the streets. That was that year.
What an intense year.
And it changed
like you
me.
couldn't have...
Yeah, it totally changed me, though. It was amazing. I mean, I had a connection with that kid, and I got to see... that was my chance to really see me as being maternal and nurturing, which set me up to be maternal and nurturing in this past relationship. And so I know that it's in me, and I use that with my friends, and I use that with my sponsees, and it brought out a really soft side of me.
Yeah, and it feels like that nurturing, like when we're allowed to express that nurturing, caring aspect of ourselves, it is self-healing.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
It's like whatever you give, you get. It's like that law of karma. It's like whatever you give, you get it right back.
Yeah.
And when you have this little helpless baby, if you can love that baby with your whole heart, it's so healing.
Yeah, and it's like, it's very much being the doctor, not the patient, which is what we need to do in the program. It's like, how do I be the doctor and not the patient here? And it was just, it was really life changing. And it's also taught me how to be sweeter with myself.
Absolutely.
How to self-soothe, which I wasn't ever really good at. My self-soothing consisted of, a needle or, cutting or, fucking some loser on Tinder. I didn't know how to self-soothe. I'd get an uncomfortable feeling. And now I have better tools on how to self-soothe. Okay, let's get a massage. Let's take a nap. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, self-soothing. That's interesting. And it's so funny. Like some people, when they get sober, they think, oh my God, I'm never going to have any fun. And I don't think we talk about that enough. It's like, what do you do for fun these days?
Ugh. Well, right now I've been so busy. I mean, it's like, it's like I was like saying the other day, complaining. I was like, my life is program in the book and I don't have any fun. So you're asking the wrong time.
If you, in a perfect world, if you could, what would you do for fun?
Watching, I mean, I laugh with my friends. I mean, to me, that's fun. We laugh our asses off. You know what I mean? It's like,
do you surround yourself with funny people?
Yeah. Well, all my friends are comics. So it's like, they're hilarious, and I just, I could be alone. I didn't used to be able to be alone. I mean, I'm sort of, and I just, good food and watching a video and, working out and going to meetings. And, we laugh a lot in meetings. At least, our secretary meeting, and we laugh our asses off.
Nice.
So
how do you do, so you're still going to meetings?
Yeah.
So we're getting close to wrapping up our time, and I usually end with my wrap-up questions are around, how do you stay sober one day at a time, right? Do you have like a daily routine or a weekly routine? So it sounds like you're still in service and you still go to meetings, but do you have like a weekly routine or a daily routine to help you stay sober?
I'm really connected to people in the program. I secretary meeting. I go to meetings. I call my sponsor every day. I still do
every day.
Yeah, because he got on my ass because I stopped doing it. And he was like, I'm going to cut people loose and you're going to be one of them unless you get back on the ball. I was like, okay.
So you have a boy sponsor?
I have a man sponsor, yeah.
A man sponsor. Okay.
And
That's most controversial.
And most, I've written pieces about it. Again,
it's not unheard of, but it's not common.
No. He's a much older man. Most of the women that he sponsors most of the people he sponsors are women. I have had bad experiences with male sponsors in the past. Like one of them fucked me during a relapse. I'll just say that. So, but again, because I am so connected to my dad, I can hear men better.
Yeah.
So I've had female sponsors. They haven't really worked out that well, except for the lesbian one where I had for 3.5 years. But again, I think that's where we get caught up in stuff. It's like if everyone has a clean boundary, then who gives a shit?
Yeah. No, there's plenty of
it's
male
like
therapists.
when AA first started, all women were sponsored by men. So again, it's one alcoholic talking to another. And it's like, can you be honest with this person and tell them everything? Do you feel safe? That's what it's about. And this person,
as long as they have integrity.
Yeah, I wanted what this person had. He had been married for he has, God, 20, 30 years as a sobriety. He'd been married for 40 something years.
Wow.
He was incredibly compassionate, and most of his sponsees are women, and for a reason, because he has a gentleness about him, and so it works for me.
Oh, sweet. He's like a fatherly
He's a
type.
hospice nurse.
Is he really? Oh, that takes a special kind of person.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, again, I am controversial in terms of that stuff. I've written a lot of pieces that are very controversial, even now, with this movement towards, substance use disorder instead of using the word junkie and stuff. And I just, again, I just feel like, we breaking an 11th tradition. I'm very much, I'm not anonymous. I wasn't anonymous in the book. I'm not anonymous when I speak. I'm not anonymous in my articles. I think 11th tradition is super outdated, and I think we cannot break the stigma of addiction unless we break the stigma of recovery. And it's like, I think that people, a lot of people think 12-step groups are creepy and cult-like and Christian-based, and I'm a Jew, and it's like, there are plenty of atheists, and you get to make your own higher power, and hey, I don't say the Lord's Prayer because it feels creepy to me. And it's like, you can make it your own. And I think that I think that AA is really cognitive behavioral therapy, and there's an incredible amount of fellowship, and we need that. And so I think that talking about it brings people in and allows them to talk about their fear. I think a lot of people don't go to meetings because of what they think it's going to be like. And now with Celebrity Rehab and Sober House, and it's in Love, she goes to meetings. It's everywhere. Like, let's catch up with the times, and the whole idea that, if you relapse and you say you're in AA, then it makes AA look like it doesn't work. Guess what? It doesn't always fucking work for everybody. That's why there is smart recovery and refuge recovery and different and harm reduction. It's one way to get sober. And if it works for you, great. I am not a fundamentalist, but it's like I told you before, if you get cancer and you have chemotherapy and you still die, do people think chemotherapy doesn't work? No, they don't. Right. So I'm more about being open and honest than I am about protecting AA. I'm a representative of me. Yes, it's given me my life back, and I think the tools are amazing, but I'm not going to let it dictate what I can and cannot say.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm obviously doing this podcast and breaking all the rules myself, it's actually really scary, right? Because I have some standing in my community, and I was afraid of what people were going to say. But I mean, you know what I was more afraid of? I was more afraid of not speaking the truth that was on my heart. There you go. That's what I was more afraid of. And I'm so grateful to you for writing the book. I feel like it's I'll leave links to it in the show notes. And girl, I am cheering you on.
Oh, thank you.
I hope you get that book deal. And I'm super excited to see you in September.
The series deal.
Yeah, the series deal. But I'm also super excited to see you
at She
in
Recovers.
LA. At She Recovers. You're going to be speaking.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. I'm going to see you there. I'm going.
And they asked me, and I'm kind of terrified. I mean, I had dinner with them, and I'm like, did you read the book? And they're like, yeah, because it's a lot of big shots. It's Janet Mock and Cheryl Strayed, and they've had Mariam Williams. You know what I mean? And I'm like,
yeah, and Tara Moore is going to be speaking. I'm super excited about that too. She wrote Playing Big. Have you read that?
No, and I'm like,
if you haven't read it, I do everything on audiobook, so I'm listening to her audiobook. It's so good.
Totally freaked out. And I'm like, have you read my book? I'm like, do you realize that I swear like a sailor and I dress like a homeless lesbian? And I'm like, they're like, we want you to be you. Yeah. I'm like, you want a little Iggy Pop in with all that namaste? Okay. And so they're like, I guess I'm supposed to be hosting the gala part, and I'm like, oh God, and I hate wearing dresses. Girl, and I'm like, I don't want to wear.
You're going to be so good.
I don't want to wear a dress. Good. They're like, wear a pantsuit, be you. They're like,
be you.
Just talk for 20 minutes and be you. And hopefully the paperback will be out by then. And I'll be signing books. And a lot of people are really excited to meet me. And so I feel incredibly honored that they asked me. I mean,
of course.
Honored.
Well, you did the brave thing, you did the brave thing and you told the truth. You know what I mean? And you were brave enough to be who you authentically are. which really cuts through the bullshit, and it goes that your message goes straight to the heart.
I just don't know how to do anything else. I don't, maybe it's brain damage. I don't know, like all those features. It's like, I don't know how to like be what
Well, it's kind of funny.
You know?
Yeah, you're the comedian, right? It's like you grew accustomed to speaking the uncomfortable, right? That's like a comedian's job, is to call out the truth.
I guess so. I mean, I've always been that person. It's like, you know, I say the thing that everyone's thinking that no one dares say. It's like, who cares? You know, that was that's my whole thing. And like in AA meetings, it's like, oh, you know, be queen of the drunks. Like, who gives a shit?
Yeah, I don't want that
like,
job.
I just don't. Yeah, it's like, I don't care. I don't care. You know, I've relapsed so many times. I don't care. And it's like,
yeah.
So
meaning that you no longer have that shame.
No,
which is
we're
amazing.
You know, I'm not in competition with anyone. It's like, you don't like me, that's fine. It's like, I just, you know, people are like, your book's so raw. I'm like, is it? Okay. Should I have cooked it more? Like,
no, thank God.
I guess that's just my style. I don't go, I don't set out to be raw, or I'm just I'm weirdly sort of unfiltered.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I love people who are brave enough to speak the truth and say what they really
brave
need
or
to
is it
say.
stupid? People are like, you're so brave. Again, I didn't even think of it as bravery. It was like, that's just, I just wrote the truth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What was I going to dress it up in? Like,
I don't know, girl.
The story's gnarly. Like, what am I going to, you know?
It's a fucking gnarly story.
Like,
also, oh my God, please have a happy ending.
What was I supposed to do? Like that girl who like tweeted that after that day of sweeping the street, she's like, just hiked with underprivileged children for 8 hours. I'm like, really? Is that what you call sweeping human shit for the courts? Okay.
That's so crazy.
The best was when I ran into someone that I dated from the rooms like 7 years before. That was the best.
Yeah.
Oh God. So I was like, what a God shot. What a God shot. Yeah, he's in a suit and I'm in a clean team uniform. I'm like, oh, how sorry that you got off this ride, huh? You blew it. I just got out of the psych ward and tried to stab my ex-husband. You fucked up. I'm a
missing out on this.
Look out my dirty bun and my broom. So mortifying. Oh God.
Wow. Lessons in humility.
Yep. Yep.
That'll be the title of the podcast. Amy Dresner, Lessons in Humility. That's super awesome. Well, listen, on that note, Amy, you are awesome. I fucking love you. I can't wait to meet you in person. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Of course.
What's that? Oh.
I said, of course. I can't wait for September. Yeah, you and I were chatting tonight. I was like, I love her.
Yeah, well, I'll super look forward to it, and I'll be cheering you on from the crowd. So if you ever feel uncomfortable, just know your girl's in the audience, and
I'm sure I'll see you. Come and say hi and give me a hug. Don't say the crowd. God, that terrifies me. Jesus Christ!
What's that?
It's only God. Right now, it just gave me a panic attack.
Well, that's good. Well, think about it now, so that by the time you get there, you'll be like, oh yeah, old hat, no big deal. Listen, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. You did great, and thank you for the book. And I'll look forward to seeing you in September.
That's great. Okay, doll. All right. Take care.
All right.
Okay,
have a good day.
Bye.
Bye. One last thing before you go, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. And if you'd like to make a donation to the podcast and help me keep the lights on, you can do so by visiting odatchat.com. There's a donation button or membership button on the right-hand side. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us.